Welcome to Catch Outdoors. I'm your host, Captain Rob Modes. This podcast is about living and playing in the great outdoors, especially down in the most southern regions of the continental U.S., the Florida Keys. Catch Outdoors is hosted by Spotify and also brought to you by your favorite podcast network. So kick back and get a taste of my Florida. Hey, folks. This week's episode of Catch Outdoors is number 105. Another season. Yep, and so it begins. Season 3 on the podcast, Catch Outdoors. It sure is amazing how time flies when you're having fun. I'm not kidding you, man. I got some special programming on today's podcast. But first, the usual fishing report. I didn't fish. Well, there was a lot going on this week. I ain't kidding you. Yes, once again, the to-do list got in the way, but my good friend Gary and his wife Cindy are in town for a month, so I'm sure there'll be more reports than usual. He and she both love to fish, so as far as she's got to work out of the house they rented. He's got to play, so we'll see how that all pans out. So stay tuned. In the meantime, fishing has really turned on here in the Keys. A combination of good and a bit cooler weather and some much needed summer rains has made a huge difference. Mahi are running. They're chasing ballyhoo out in the 200 to 300 foot range in the Atlantic. Trolled baits are working really well. But be sure to keep something on hand to toss at a free swimmer. So if you see a Mahi pop up or he or she is working on a weed line, have something you can throw at him for sure. Yellowtail are almost always a go-to down this way, and there's lots of biters out in 30 feet of water on the patch reefs. Not much size to them there, I can attest to that. So go deeper, young man. From 50 to 100 feet, they tend to reach legal size at that point. So it's basically just dropping bottom rigs down and working it. You don't need to. You can chum it up if you want to, but quite frankly, I have better luck just dropping something all the way to the bottom, piece of squid, piece of shrimp, something like that. And that'll most certainly get it done. Even better, of course, would be a live pilcher. You know, if you can get them. I'm thinking about getting a net, but I'm gonna have to get a small one. If throwing a net for me is a trick. You know, bad back, all that kind of stuff. I'd have to do it in 2 throws and be done. If I didn't, then I resort to shrimp. I'm toying with the idea. We'll see how that goes. Sea trout have moved back into the back country. Yay! Look for them over the grass flats, around Cross Bank, and farther up into Florida Bay. Again, water's cooled off. We got a lot of rain, and the rain moved in, and we've had a lot of rain. We've had a lot of rain over this past week, so I'm anxious to get back out there, but I got delayed. Had a little surgery on my chin, had one of those basal cancer things removed, and the doctor's like, you stay home, don't play, and don't go in the sun, because he gave me one of those antibiotics. So those of you that ever done an antibiotic and you make the mistake of going out in the sun, you will truly understand what that's about. Don't do it. You cannot cover yourself enough, and it ain't good for you, so don't do that. Snook are biting near the islands around Flamingo, and a few redfish have been caught along the mangrove edge in the northern reaches of Florida Bay. I would say slightly west of a line, looking straight up from Isla Mirada to the west, out toward the Gulf of Mexico. Redfish bite is definitely improving. We are still storm watching down this way. It's still September. Come on, October. The Atlantic is still percolating, but not as bad as it was a couple of weeks ago. There was only one outlying batch of low pressure and stormy-looking weather that was named Philippe yesterday, which at first did appear to be pointing right at us. So everybody was kind of, wringing their hands and crossing their fingers. But the latest spaghetti track, as we call them, if you're not familiar with what that is, it looks like spaghetti. That run, the latest run shows it making a right-hand northerly turn and becoming another what we call a fish storm. It's going to stay out in the Atlantic Ocean. Yay. Or shoo would be a better way to put it. But we're getting close to the end of this nonsense. They always say, about the middle of October 15th or so is when things should wind down completely. We shall see. I really, really hope so. This extra rain has helped cool the waters off considerably, and warm water is very conductive to these storms. And hopefully this rain we've finally gotten will help. And speaking of hurricanes, it's been 1 year since the southwest coast was hit by Ian. My old stomping grounds over in the Fort Myers Beach, Sanibel, Pine Island area. They're still picking up the pieces and put things back together along the coast from Fort Myers Beach, Sanibel, Captiva, and Pine Island. I'm going to say it'll probably take another year or two before there's a good bit of recovery. I hate to tell you that, but that's just the way it is. And another 10 years before the islands get to even looking more tropical again. Growth, things come back, starting to look like a jungly island that it used to look like. It's sad right now, but it'll get better. Point of reference to that, for those not familiar with the damage caused to mangrove islands and the bays by hurricanes, Hurricane Charlie hit Fort Myers in 2004. Ran right across Upper Sanibel, Captiva, right on out into Charlotte Harbor. And there is still noticeable thinness of the mangrove islands in the northern end of Pine Island Sound. And it's been almost 20 years. So it takes quite a while for the recovery. The recovery is happening. I mean, you can see a big difference in the way the mangrove looks up that way by the old fish jacks, but it takes a long time. It takes a long time for that stuff to come back. So hang in there. And hey, I like doing that. What I know about fishing Southwest Florida, Bridge to Paradise, and Take a Kid Fishing are all books authored by me and are available on Amazon Books and Kindle. You can also order them directly from my website at Catch Ya Outdoors. Those copies will arrive signed by me. The number of copies are definitely dwindling rapidly, so get your copies soon. I doubt I'll be reordering. I can almost assure you I will not be reordering hard copies after this last shipment is all gone. That'll make them even more special. And yes, there's a book in the works about fishing the Florida Keys. I mention it every week. I have to. Maybe I won't next few weeks. I'll just be real quiet about it. But it's coming along. So, we'll get there. Don't worry. All right, now for episode 104, another season. I'm going to head back for just a moment or two to the beginning. So stand by. Hi, folks. This is Captain Rob Modes, and guess what? I finally did it. You say what? A podcast. I've been fussing and just going back and forth and trying to figure out what to do about this thing. And a lot of people listen, and a lot of people have said, why don't you just do a podcast? Why don't you get yourself back on the microphone and do something that you enjoy doing? And for those that don't know, 11 years of radio in front of the mic every weekend, talking about fishing and outdoor sports and outdoor this and outdoor that. And I just missed it. And so through friends, family, professional people, they're like, you need a podcast. You need to put together a podcast and just get on past this. And so I did. Wow. That's been 2 years ago. It's even hard for me to believe. When I first started the podcast, the idea was to do a bunch of Florida. And then just as season 2 was about to begin, I moved along with Jonelle, my lovely wife, down to the Florida Keys, namely Key Largo. And it had long been a distant idea and thought we've had, and suddenly things just seemed to come together all at once. So rather than, rehash the places and work on all the places and all over Florida on the podcast, I decided to focus more on this chain of islands called the Keys. Why? Because they're an eclectic location loved by most travelers from around the world. While I know quite a bit about these rocks and the waters that surround them, boy, I do know a lot about these rocks. I thought it'd be fun to dig deeper and find the fun and unusual things to do and talk about down here. Season 3 will be even more of a focus here instead of outside of the Keys, except for perhaps the elements of fishing. I'm still drawn to the other waters of Florida, but I'll take a firm stance that the best place to wet a line is in the fabulous Florida Keys. So hang in there. I'm going to have to do a lot of information and feeding information about new and my new old home, as I like to call it. And I can't wait to share it with my listeners. But first, a little reminiscing from the previous 2 years. Oddly enough, the first episode I did, the first full episode, technically number 2, they counted the trailer as 1 when I submitted this to Spotify originally, but I did one about mystery writers of Florida. It's still to this day the most listened to podcast from the past and from now. It's amazing. People really have locked onto that thing. Even the new listeners that come, I don't know if they go back and hear the trailer and then they want to hear the next thing after it and they stick with it. I'm not sure how it happened, but the Mystery Writer one is still big. Go listen. It's fun. It talks all about the authors that represent Florida, mostly through mystery writing, murder, and mayhem. It's one of my favorite genres, and I really enjoy reading the book. I enjoy all mystery novels, but I really enjoy the ones by the folks who write about Florida or write the episode in Florida. But it's still to this day the most listened to podcast from the past. The second most downloaded episode is about movies filmed in the Florida Keys. That one was more recent, and that one has gotten an absolute ton of hits. So I guess what amazes me is that it finally, the third one is about fishing. Because from my friends, family, and people that have known me for years, I'm more known about fishing than just anything else. But for some reason, those two things people found more fascinating, which gives me a clue of what to do in the future mixed with fishing. But anyway, after that was finally a string of fishing podcasts. Probably, I think there are about 7 or 8 of them in a row that are all in the top numbers. So go figure, with a wink. Other popular episodes were both boat drinks and boat food, and just about all of the quotes, all the ones that I did that are called Random Thought, those were also crazy popular. Those are mixed episodes is what they were. It was an episode of mixed subjects, I should say. They were mostly created when I had several short subjects on my notepad that I found interesting, but they just weren't long enough to squeeze out 30 minutes or so of a podcast. So I would eventually group them all together, and believe me, that's still going to happen. The breakdown of listeners was also interesting over the past couple of years. The U.S. was number 1, with Canada second. And then in order, Germany, Mali, Colombia, India, Netherlands, Brazil, and Australia. And I had to go back and look up Mali. I knew it was in North Africa somewhere, but I had no idea where. But I found it interesting. There were quite a few hits on that, quite a few listens on that, about traveling to the Keys. Most listeners used Apple Podcasts as their means of listening to Catch Outdoors by a long shot. I would say about 58% of all plays were on Apple Podcast. And then like 20-something% on down from there by other players. I thought that was interesting. And male listeners clearly outnumbered females in my audience. And most are over the age of 40. Not exactly the most sought-after demographic by advertisers, but there you go. So, gentlemen, thanks for listening. And ladies, come on, pick it up. Pass it on to other lady anglers and other ladies that might be interested in the Florida Keys, and tell them to give it a listen. See if we can't get those female numbers up a bit. So this season will be mostly focused on the Florida Keys. You got to give the listeners what they want, plain and simple. Besides a regular dose of fishing information, there'll also be more Florida travel, Florida seasonal happenings, and places to see and visit. I'll also try to spread the love around from Key Largo, Islamorada, Marathon, and Big Pine, but it's kind of tough to ignore Key West. It's still and will most likely always be and always continue to be the main reason visitors come to the Keys. So not much of a change by me over the past 6 months or so, just a bit more centering on my home. As most of you have already figured out, I love it here. Here's something I asked Jonelle about not long ago in regards to what each area of the Keys is most known for. And I got a lot of questions about that too from folks through email and through text, but a lot of email questions just along the same lines. I never much thought about it until getting more engrossed in what the Keys have to offer. It's really something for everyone. Key Largo, considered to be the scuba diving capital of the world. Yep, so we'll start with Key Largo. Of course, you might get an argument from other places, but it's hard to beat the sheer amount of dive spots we've got down this way. Off the shores of Key Largo, there are numerous wrecks, reefs, drop-offs, patch reefs, snorkeling areas. It's just beautiful. Let's just put it that way. It's just beautiful. And the enthusiasm for divers that visit and live here, it's unbound. They absolutely tell you how much they love coming down here to dive. So that's Key Largo in a nutshell. We got fishing. Got a lot of fishing down here, especially offshore. Great drop-off off the reef out here. It's very, very close. You only have to go out 6 or 7 miles to hit 100 feet of water. So that obviously plays in with the fishing people. But it's really surprising how much diving is front and center down here on this island and in this area. Next is Islamorada, the sport fishing capital of the world. I'm not going to even argue that one. Both the Atlantic and the backcountry are known for excellent fishing. I have caught more big and highly sought after fish in that area than anywhere else, period. Tarpon runs. Oh my gosh, the tarpon runs in the fall and in the spring are they're the best. And I've done a lot of tarpon runs all over the state of Florida on both sides. And it's incredible here. Islamorada offers close action to the backcountry. It doesn't take you long to get into serious fishing areas when you launch off the bay side of Islamorada. It's just one of those places that I think is a lot of fun to be around and hang out and fish. Marathon's next on the list. Also known, you're down right in the middle of the Keys now at Marathon, mile marker 50-something. Also known for great fishing, but a little different than the Upper Keys in that they fish the Atlantic and the Gulf of Mexico there, not so much Florida Bay, because they're out on the outer edge of Florida Bay, past the boundary, if you will. I personally think of Marathon as the place to eat great food from top restaurants. I really do. I visit one of the prettiest beaches I've ever been to, and I've been to a great many of them in Florida. That would be Sombrero Beach. I really think that's one of the most beautiful beaches I've ever been to. Small, but gorgeous. And I also think of the iconic 7 Mile Bridge. Who wouldn't? You can walk out on it, bicycle on it, jog if you want. It's 2 miles out to the Pigeon Key, and it's just a great place to tour, a great place to see. So the 7 Mile Bridge, I always, even though it's at the end of Marathon, headed down to the Lower Keys, it's still to me a part of Marathon. So there you go, the Lower Keys. That would be Big Pine Key. Big Pine. That's the upper part of it. It's that area's got to be the Key Deer. They are the coolest. Fully grown, they are just a bit taller than a Great Dane. Friendly, pretty easy to spot in the early mornings and the evenings. Big Pine is also at the northern and northeastern. It's kind of hard to get the directions on this. Into the string of keys from the island all the way down to Lower Sugarloaf. So in other words, from Big Pine to Lower Sugarloaf and Saddle Bunch Keys, the fishing is outstanding there. That's on the north side. That would be on the bay side of that. Those islands are really weird. Instead of running like a blob of an island, mostly east-west or circular, they run mostly north-south. They're they're elongated. They're longer islands. And in between those islands where the water runs in and out due to tides, the fishing there is fabulous. They also has one of my favorite hidden restaurants, the No Name Pub. If you haven't been, go. Yeah, baby. The No Name Pub in Florida, in the Keys, pizza and wings. Okay. Just forget the fish part. Just go there and take my word for it, if you can find it. And then there's Key West, known mostly as a party town thanks to Mr. Jimmy Buffett, but it's much more than that. It's an old pirate town full of folks that just want to get away from it all. It's got wonderful music, great food. No one really cares who you are or what you do. I've never seen so many people in one place almost always smiling. It's hard to beat Key West. Oh, there are other places in the mountains of Colorado or the beautiful Blue Ridge Mountain. I've been to both, and they're gorgeous, and I love going there. But Key West is so much different. I had 2 recent emails. And both of them were pretty much asked the same thing. So I thought, okay, I'm going to answer this because this is the new season and this is where I'm going with this anyway. So I was asked about my favorite itinerary for a day in the Keys. And I answered both the emails the same way. I said, well, it would actually take 3 days. I don't think that a lot of visitors clearly understand the distance needed to travel along US 1 to see the entire island chain. So I continuously get this question, we're coming down for 1 day. What should we do? And I think to myself, well, you have no idea, do you? They've looked at a map, they've heard of Key West, they know where Key Largo is, but they have no idea that we're 107 miles apart. It's a long way. It's a long trip, and you're not going to get much done in 1 day. But I still answered it in a way that I hope made sense to them and will make sense to you all. Key Largo starts at mile marker 107.2, and then Key West begins at mile marker 2.3. And that's the entrance to Key West via the Salt Run Bridge. And then once you get on US 1, you just continue on down. That's Roosevelt's what that is. You just continue on down, and it ends at mile marker 0 down by Jackson Square, because the island is about 2 miles across. And, that's the road is. Let's put it that way. The road is 2 miles. The island's actually 4 miles across. But I hope that puts it in perspective. It's a long, long way to Key West, and you're only on a 2x4 mile stretch. So it's the very, very end of the road. So back to the original question. I broke it up this way. In the Upper Keys, that would be this area. Do a snorkel dive trip. This is if you have 1 day now. Do a snorkel dive trip out of one of the dive resorts at Pennicamp State Park or a dive resort. Lunch down the road at the Lorelei on the bay side of Islamorada. Dinner at Ziggy and Mad Dogs, also in Islamorada. You could substitute a fishing trip for the snorkel dive trip. And there's your day. Okay? Fair enough. In the Middle Keys, go to Sombrero Beach for the day. Pack a lunch, fishing gear, comfortable chairs, snorkels. Get there early and then leave. When you've had enough local beauty, sun and salt, you can, cruise on. That night, check out the Island Fish Company for dinner. Right on the Gulf of Mexico. Good place for a sunset if you time it right, and there are docks where the boats come and go. There's lots to see, lots to do, just sitting in your seat at the restaurant. And the food is excellent. The Lower Keys. Check out the Key Deer. It's a must. Go early if you can to the National Key Deer Refuge Nature Center, and then explore the area. It's really big. Fish if you can. Perhaps take a late morning trip, because it's easier to see the deer in the morning. So that's a tough choice right there. Dinner at the Square Grouper on Cudjoe Key. You won't regret it. The Square Grouper has got some of the finest seafood in the area, so there you go for that one. Key West. I almost always do Key West this way. Breakfast at the Blue Heaven. Their Benedicts are to die for. Make sure you also start with a mimosa or a Bloody Mary. After all, it is Key West, and you're on vacation. Explore the Hemingway House, the Shipwreck Museum, and the Key West Cemetery. Yes, the cemetery is really cool, and there are guided trips there to tell you all about who's in it and where the funniest headstones are. Take a ride on the conch train. Yeah, if you haven't done that, do it. First of all, the guys driving the train give you all kinds of historical information about Key West and the architecture and things like that. So it's a great little trip. When it's time for lunch, grab a bite most anywhere you like along Duval. I like to have a burger or cheeseburger, if you will. I'm not a huge cheeseburger fan, so I like burgers the best. But at Margaritaville, go there. Then have a nice cold beer with it. Walk Duval and explore the shops until it's time to make it over to Mallory Square for the sunset celebration. And then dinner at Louis' Backyard. Fine dining with a view of the Atlantic. That's all the way down at the other end of the island, southern end of the island. After dinner, it's back to the Old Town area for live music at the Green Parrot, Captain Tony's, Sloppy Joe's, or the Hog's Breath Saloon. So for the upcoming season, I'm going to make a point to do these itinerary type podcasts with things to do and see in the Keys. If something new pops up, I'll make sure to mention it. And by the way, Fantasy Fest is right around the corner. You better book a room right now if you plan to go. It's the end of October. It's truly a sight to see at least once in your life, as I always tell people. So that's, yes, you absolutely you got to go. You got to go check out Fantasy Fest. If you've never done it, do it. The parade is definitely worth being there for. The parade is really something to see. A heartfelt thank you to all the listeners that have hung in there with me for over the past 2 years. There's a lot more to come, so stand by for more Catch Ya Outdoors. Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed my podcast, please tell a friend, leave a review, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. The Facebook page is Catch Ya Outdoors. The website's catchaoutdoors.com, where you can find all the previous podcasts and a schedule of what's to come. Until next time, get outdoors and enjoy.